And we're back with Coalition Purple. Good afternoon.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Hey, listen, I got a dilemma.
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't know if I should send you some flowers, a box of chocolate, maybe a diamond necklace. It'll be a year next week, well, the 9th, that we've been doing this.
Oh wow.
It's our first anniversary. Can you believe that? It's been a
Yeah, I
year.
can't. I never even occurred to me that we would be that close to actually, having done this for a year. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was on my walk today, and it just, I don't know, it's like, God, when did we start that? And then came back and our first post was October 9th.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
Never even occurred to me that we've been doing this for a year. That's crazy.
so
I have to go back,
congratulations.
and look at some of the older posts and see how much younger I look.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. But anyways, so hey, I'm just, I think we've done, I don't know, 30 some, 31, 32, something like that. So it's not quite every week, but hey, we've been hanging in there. So,
Yeah.
just gotta keep it moving.
Well, it's good that, going back to the beginnings, and from what I've said from the very start, this is, an attempt to have something to say and a place to say it.
Yeah,
So I think it's pretty nice. I've been really happy, doing this for getting close to a year now, and
yeah,
I've enjoyed the interactions that we've had. I feel like we've, put some ideas out into the universe, so it's great.
exactly, exactly. Well, and it also kind of brought up when it dawned on me earlier, it kind of dawned on me in this whole issue that I keep hearing about people concerned about freedom of speech and people are being canceled and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know. I keep thinking, I mean, there's obviously places where there's probably been some controversial things, but at the same time, it's like there's more chances to communicate and
Yeah.
describe or get involved with places to communicate what you feel than ever before. In my mind, it's like I think so. I don't really see the issue about freedom of speech now. Um, again, there's definitely been some examples where it's like, yeah, well, that wasn't cool. But generally speaking, I don't get it. I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that.
Well, basically, my political view in many respects is not so much that things right at the moment are horrible, but the trajectory of things is not looking good. And I think it's the same way with free speech. Technology and innovation, which is something that I talk about all the time and always try and push and think we need as much of as possible, have created new avenues for free speech. But a lot of the politicians out there want to close off those avenues to people and restrict what people have the rights to say. So the question becomes, uh, who wins that battle? Do the people who want to censor online discussion and online sites like this, like what we're doing,
Right.
or do the people who want to have it flourish and allow people to say, what's on their mind? Do they come out ahead? And so I think that's really the question. Do we squander and throw away the opportunities that we have, or do we do things to make them better and give even more people access to them? So
Yeah.
that's what it
Yeah.
is.
I don't know. It just seems like there's so many. If anything, I think we almost have almost too much information and too much
Yeah,
communication going on, and
yeah,
so it's like we got to figure out how to sort that out as well. But no, I get it. I mean, and a lot of it comes down to the technology companies, which I do worry about. That
yeah,
we're putting so much power in the hands of certain companies and in some cases certain individuals. Um, but you can say that about technology companies. I mean, there's other oligarchs, I think, that are kind of emerging over time. I mean, you think of what's happening with like SpaceX and stuff. I mean, NASA would cease to exist without SpaceX right now,
yeah,
where it used to be kind of, and I'm not saying what SpaceX is doing is there's anything wrong or nefarious or anything like that, but it's gotten so far to the point where any of that kind of research and science that's going on is so beholden to that one company, kind of like Boeing has been for years, right? When it comes
yeah.
to the aircraft industry, it's like, and that's they're struggling now because of some things. So that's always a worry for me that
Yeah,
we allow so much power basically through these private companies, including, by the way, the DNC and the RNC.
right. And then I can, as I say, I agree with you on that. But that's really where the third party comes in, in the idea of interjecting as much new ideology into the discussion as possible, because what you want to have happen is you want to have a government that's capable of making reasonable regulations. And then, you know, when the government is pro public, pro the population,
Mm-hmm.
and not just pro business, then there's essentially a firewall between big corporations and the public that people can resort to if big corporations are doing something untoward. But the real problem I've always felt is gets into when the government starts doing things that
Yep.
are unreasonable and untoward, and they start seizing more power. Well, who do you turn to? That's it. Your court of last resort, literally, is the government. And so, if the government and the courts and all that are corrupted by one party oligarchy rule, then you've got nothing. So that's why I just feel like you want to diffuse the power of the government as much as possible, and then force people within the government to actually come together to make regulations that actually benefit a wide array of people. And by having coalitions and by having multiple parties, I think you facilitate that kind of idea. And so it's the diversity within the government, the multiplicity of parties, which keeps the government from getting overly powerful.
Right.
And then it's the cooperation of those parties together that keeps the corporations from getting powerful. And if you have that sort of combination of things, I think it works out well. But what I see is that we're losing that a lot, and we're concentrating more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and I shouldn't go on walks before we do this because that's when I start thinking about all this stuff. And when I was thinking about the whole oligarch thing, it's
Hmm.
like, well, why don't all of the existing third parties in whatever form they are, this seems like a great time for them to actually, even though they probably most of them don't agree with each other on different things, the one thing they probably do agree on is they would like to have more standing in the political process. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, what prevents them all joining efforts and file lawsuits breaking up a monopoly called the RNC and the DNC?
yeah,
Because they are truly monopolies at this point.
yeah, yeah. As I say, I'm kind of a big advocate of lawsuits, just generally speaking, because I think that the courts, in a lot of respects, give people, um, access to power in a sense, because you're using the laws that exist to fight for a cause. And when you have laws that are fair and laws that are written in ways that are designed to facilitate people's rights, then you're in great shape. As soon as you start having laws that aren't written to facilitate people's rights, I think you've got real big problems. And
Yeah.
actually, I kind of wanted to mention something about this because it's been sort of rolling around in my head a little bit. I was sort of looking at some of the conflict between the two parties in the different states trying to determine, things like, do absentee ballots require a signature? How much power do the governors have versus the legislature? Can you make rules about, opening and closing polling places and various things? And what struck me about it, and this is just me trying to remember as best I can, was that you go back and you look at some of the laws that people are bringing forward, saying, for instance, the legislature makes the rules about the election and it determines, what has to be signed and what has to get sent out and where it has to go and who has to look at it and how it gets counted and all this stuff. And you read those laws and you can see that, this law is written in a way to just make sure that,
Right.
things are kind of getting done in an organized fashion. And it'll be a law that was written 80 years ago or something.
Right.
And then you see the challenge to that saying, like, well, the governor of this state just wants to not have people, you know, you don't need a signature on an absentee ballot anymore because, that's just excluding people. And it's just such an arbitrary thing. And you look at how well thought out the 80-year-old law is, and you look at how arbitrary the, you know, people challenging that law are. And that's one of the things that really worries me, because it seems like there was a time when there was more, you know, balance in power between the parties that actually cared about how the government functioned and how it worked. And
Right.
they wrote laws to sort of protect that functioning. That doesn't seem to be most people's focus now. Now it's just grabbing power. And there's been a lot of things that have gone on in the last, few election cycles where you see, you know, actually, the RFK thing, should RFK be on these ballots or should he not? He says, I
Right.
don't want to be on the ballot. And they say, sorry, you have no choice but to be on it. Even though 5 minutes ago we were saying that we didn't want you on it and you couldn't be, and that the signatures you gathered, we said were legal, even though, we don't require signatures on ballots. So we confirm this. We confirm that your signatures are invalid while we don't even look at signatures on absentee ballots for some reason. And it's like this whole arbitrary sequence of things where you're just sort of deciding whatever is best for you at that moment, instead of saying we need a series of laws that actually look out, for the system as a whole.
Right.
And that's where I think, things like free speech and the idea that we could be losing our free speech. Hey, if people are just going to come on and arbitrarily say that, you get to say this but this other person doesn't,
Right. Well, and it
you
varies
know
state by state on top of it, right? So
yeah, of
it's
course,
like,
it's very different everywhere.
it's and so that, I guess in one respect that's good because of the whole states' rights thing and all that, which I get. But the other time, it just opens up the opportunity. And the RFK thing actually is a really interesting one because in some states it was like, no problem, we'll take you off. In other states, they're fighting tooth and nail to keep him on because it's going to dilute the vote one way or the
Right.
other. And it's like, depending on the state, right? And it's like, okay, you know, I mean, I do understand there might be a cutoff where, hey, we have printed ballots already, and you at that point you did want to be on it, and
Yeah.
then so I kind of get that part, but some of the other stuff, like you said, that's pretty arbitrary. It's like, no, we just don't think it's a good idea,
Yeah.
So
And another thing that it sort of fits into the same vein with the stacking of the Supreme Court.
yeah,
A lot of people say that they don't like some particular decision the Supreme Court made, and therefore they should just throw additional justices on it, and then it'll change the makeup of the Supreme Court. But if you really think about what you're doing is that if you do that, you essentially are getting rid of the Supreme Court, because that means every president that would come along would just simply stack it more to their liking is the next. You just stack and stack and stack and stack until there's 10,000 people on the Supreme Court and it doesn't mean anything. And people who say that don't seem to consider the idea that there needs to be a Supreme Court. And of course, over the year, the Supreme Court has made awful decisions. And then those decisions, in many times have been overturned or rethought, and better decisions were made. So there's this ebb and flow of, sometimes decisions are good,
yeah,
sometimes they're bad, sometimes you like them, sometimes you don't. But you need to have an institution that's actually capable of making those decisions over time so that you can, in fact, get things to change in the right direction. If you just eliminate completely the organization itself, if you eliminate the founding principles and the separation of powers doctrine, and you start to eliminate all these things, you can't get them back. It's not like you can just say, we're going to start stacking the Supreme Court now, and then later on, we're just not going to do it anymore. Once you start doing that, it's gone. The institutions that you need are destroyed. And again, that goes to me back to the idea of free speech. Once you've lost free speech, if we take a chance and we roll the dice and we allow people to come in and start censoring, I'm not sure you ever get the First Amendment back.
right, yeah, yeah. No, and well, and on the Supreme Court, I think it's the same issue with the Supreme Court that we have just in general with the political system. That I understand the concept of lifetime terms, but
Mhm.
that probably made sense when the average age was back in the day 50, 40, right? But
You and I would have
now,
been dead many, many years ago by this.
exactly right. But it just the idea of term limits down the reasonable term limits because,
Yeah.
people, we actually had a comment on one of the videos we did where somebody was saying all the politicians, they should only be elected for 2 years. It's like, well, you can't,
Yeah, that's a little much.
you can't find the bathroom after 2 years. It just takes a while to get some level of institutional knowledge. So
Yeah.
it's got to be reasonable, but at the same time, having people that are on the court or in the Congress for 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
I just don't think that's a healthy thing either. And the way to deal with the Supreme Court, because, I think it's term limits. And because I totally agree with you, everybody will just start playing whack-a-mole, it's
Yeah.
like,
And
okay,
and
you
that
added two, we're going to add three,
right, exactly. And that's the thing, if there is a discussion to be had about reasonable changes to, how things work because things have changed over time, things are different now than they were 250 years ago. Yeah, of course, you want to have that discussion, but when you start talking about, well, we're going to destroy an institution that's an integral
Right,
part of how the system of government in this country works and replace it with what? I
right.
mean, you hear fanatics talking about what they're going to do. I mean, let's look and just to say stack the Supreme Court. I mean, do we all at this point have so much faith in Joe Biden's wisdom that we want him abolishing the Supreme Court and then replacing it with something that he sees
Right,
fit? I don't trust Joe Biden to do that. I don't think anyone does. And
right.
so, why would you destroy an institution that's so incredibly important?
Yeah,
To me, that's just crazy.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And I know the argument has always been that over the years, there's been different numbers of people that are on the Supreme Court. It's
Yeah,
gone up and down over the years. Whether the number's 9 or 11 or whatever. I think the whole premise is don't mess with it unless, as
yeah,
far as the number of people, because, you know, even in our lifetime's a blink of the eye. I'd say
yeah,
as much as I'd like to see term limits, what they're deciding are things that are going to have an effect for, centuries in some cases, right?
yeah.
And so, you want careful, thoughtful people that hopefully are fair, and I think at any point in time, you could look at any individual Supreme Court justice and question their, you know, validity
Yeah.
on any side of the political spectrum. Um, but, you have to take the good with the bad a little bit. The things are never going to go your way 100%.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and if you got a better argument, take it back to the Supreme Court and get it changed. That's the whole concept behind the whole democracy process.
So I think that the good and the bad ebb and flow thing, I think is, you hear a lot of people saying that they're unhappy that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and there
Mhm.
certainly are a lot of people that. But I always try and point out that the same court that overturned Roe v. Wade protected a woman's right to access the morning after pill nationwide, blocked the lawsuit that was trying to interfere with that. So it's like, on one hand, the same nine people decided that they didn't like Roe, but then they turned around and decided that they did like access to abortion and birth control in the form of new technology. And so again, it's good and bad, but you shouldn't just throw it out, right?
Yeah,
That doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing that I've said over the years, and I think it would be a good idea, is I would strongly support an amendment to the Constitution that says the Supreme Court is 9 members.
right.
Just clarify it, be done with it, put it into the Constitution. I think the vast majority of people would vote for that, and that's what it would be. It's just 9. It's been
Yeah,
9 for
a long time.
100 years, or I
Yeah,
mean, a
yeah,
long, long time. Just
it has.
cap it at 9. It's 9. That's what it should be. Done.
Yeah, yeah. I'd go along with that if they included, 25-year term limits or something,
Yeah.
just because I do think it's just things do change. People do get sort of entrenched. I don't care if just the fact that they don't really today have the same rules applying against them in terms of ethics and all that. Again, and
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting, I think there's some things that are kind of questionable that have gone on recently, but at the same time, hey, you know, nobody's putting rules in place, so
Right.
you can blame them all you want, but you need to put some rules in place then,
Yeah.
somehow, some way. So, anyways, I just get, I think the whole freedom of speech thing is it has so many tentacles into everything that goes on,
Yeah.
and and we need to do anything we can to increase it, with the understanding, and going back to the Supreme Court, they have ruled what, the First Amendment's all about. And you're free to say pretty much anything you want as long as you're not doing harm, right? It's the whole
Yeah.
can't yell
You
fire in a
have to
crowded
directly
theater.
call for violence against people and,
Yeah, right. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? So, so I, and so when it, because there is that standard in essence, which we have from the Supreme Court, it, it's still subjective. you
yeah.
know it's like, and we're going to see that play out over time, probably with this whole Trump thing and January 6th. That's like, because that's a freedom of speech issue in many ways,
Yeah.
whether he's really, through his words, was helping incite that scenario. And again, people are arguing on both sides of that. And
Yep.
so, and it does become down to a subjective decision whether that, you know, truly is freedom of speech.
Yeah, and I think that though that when you do have alternate sides calling things into question, saying, he said this or he said that or whatever, the answer to speech you don't like is more speech. And I'm not the first person to
Oh,
say that.
exactly.
If somebody says something that you think is wrong, call them on it.
Yep.
I mean, everybody has to have, right and access to the platforms that are, theoretically free speech platforms.
Yep.
And so long as we can maintain that, and as long as people have a voice, then I think that you know you have a chance to have things sort of work themselves out. But actually, since we're talking about Jan 6, and this is another thing I've it's really bugged me for a long time, is that the Jan 6 committee in Congress was not properly constituted, which is to say that in a normal House committee, what happens is that the Democrats get to put a certain number of people on that they choose, and that's the Speaker of the House, and then the minority leader gets to choose another certain number of people. And I think that it's something like 7 to 5. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but anyway, the whole point of that is that both sides get to appoint people to the panel. What happened with the Jan 6 committee was the Democrats who were chairing the panel rejected the choices that the Republicans were making. They said, we want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this. And they said, nope, we're going to call them as witnesses. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And so the Republicans were unable to put the members that they wanted on that panel. In other words, the Democrats made sure that there were no dissenting voices. They censored the Republican Party's ability to participate in the January 6th committee. And the only ones they let on were Never Trump
Kissinger.
fans.
Yeah.
That's it, two. And it should have had at least, I think it's either 3 or 5.
Yeah.
Memory is failing me. I'm old. But it's like, that's actually censorship. Because what the Democrats did was they prevented the alternate viewpoint from coming out in that committee, and they had a show trial and they put it on primetime television. And when they put it on primetime television, the people airing it didn't come on every day and say, okay, here's the Soviet style Jan 6 committee, which has no opposition on it at all, to have another propaganda moment that we're going to show you in primetime. Never
Yeah.
said that. And so I think that going back to censorship, that to me is a prime example of censorship. When you use your control of the committee process to freeze out the opposition so that you can have a committee that has no opposition on it, that is censorship. That is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And well, the whole committee process is just broken, anyways, just generally
Yeah,
speaking.
generally, yeah.
I mean, you can kind of go down, and I agree with you the way that it all was handled. Had a very specific purpose, but you can flip it on a lot of other committees, and they just all, it's all become theater at this point. They're all using these committees to label each other, a fascist or a communist, or trying to, embarrass somebody or what. It's really not trying to get to the answer to anything. And even in things that used to be fairly bipartisan, where it comes to the military or veterans and all that, it's just gotten so, it just, it well, and one of the other things on my list was like the VP debate. All of this stuff has become, all of this stuff has just become theater. It's almost meaningless. And that's where I think there's just so much apathy with people, or they just tune out because it's like, this is just not worth my time,
Yeah.
because they're all playing a role, and the role isn't to try and get to some kind of mutual answer to whatever the question is.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things.
Yeah, you have 4.5 minutes.
The first one, though, just about the vice presidential debate, that it always strikes me is that this debate is taking place after voting has started. And I think that's one thing
Yeah,
that they just don't make any sense anymore. I mean, if people are already, if you can already have voted, when what's the point of having a debate? What
well,
percentage of the community has already made up their mind? I mean,
sure.
maybe it'll influence some people, but still, it's like it's
Well, I want to keep looking for all these uncommitted people, and I understand there's a
oh,
lot
and
of
that
people.
yeah,
I understand there's a lot of people that just tune this all out until probably literally the day of. But it's like, if you're somewhat of a breathing human being, you must have some idea by
yeah.
now.
I think sometimes in other elections there's sort of more undecideds. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think in this particular one, because it's a really unusual situation where you've got two people who are essentially part of presidential administrations. You had a Trump administration for four
sure.
years. You pretty much know
Yep,
what you're getting with Trump.
yep,
And Kamala Harris has been part of the Harris-Biden administration for 4 years, so you pretty much know what you're going to get. I mean, a lot of the time in a presidential election, one of the candidates is, the governor of a state that you've never been to. And so you just
right,
don't know anything about the person. You
right.
see, there's really not any reason that you would. And so there's a lot of campaigning and debates and things where you're trying to sort of sort out, well, who is this person? Is this person qualified? Do I have some interest in or any kind of common ground with this person? But in this particular election, I mean,
Yeah,
everybody knows everybody. I mean, it's not.
yeah, yeah. It's
I
a
agree with you. I
do-over.
don't think there's a lot of undecideds out there anymore. I think basically people know who they're voting for at this point.
I do too. Yeah, no, it's definitely a do-over. In fact, if anything, probably the VP debate was somewhat more interesting, only in the respect that I didn't really know much about JD Vance or Tim Walz,
Yeah,
really. And so they were probably closer to what would normally happen as far as their debate. Now, having sat through that whole debate, I don't know if you did,
I did
um,
actually.
um, I, I walked away. It's like, okay, they all have really got their talking points memorized really well. There was no any aha moments from either one of them, really.
Yeah.
Other
I,
than they were civil.
yeah.
I give them, a gold star for being civil with each other.
Yeah. I think to me, the maybe the only thing that I felt was really kind of important in the debate was when Vance called out the biased fact checking. I think that in the long run, if you're going to have a third party or any party other than the Democrat Party, anybody involved in politics, anyone involved in future campaigns is going to have to be able to stand up and say, "Look, you can't be this biased, or we're not going to do this."
Right.
If you're going to have a debate, then moderators just need to be the ones asking questions, and they should be asking questions of uh, both candidates equally, and hopefully in the future, three or four candidates equally. And that what they really should do is allow the candidates to question each other and not have the moderators do much of anything except say, "Hey, settle down.
Well,
Let's,
that's what a
talk
debate's
next
supposed to
topic."
be, right?
Right. But this thing where you have biased moderators showing their bias, controlling how much time somebody has to speak, when they have to speak, and then turning your microphone off, that I think was important for the American people to see, to sort of be like, okay, let's take a step back and what are we really watching here? Because when Vance tried to make his point, they cut off his mic. Now, I don't know if it's going to dawn on a lot of people, the importance of that situation, but they're censoring Pence in the middle of a debate where he's saying that the moderators are lying. And so, if you can't even have that level of fairness, then how much credibility, how much credence should we give to anything that these news networks say? Everybody should learn from this that you have to be very incredulous and very suspicious when the news media is telling you something, and you should go out and look for facts yourself and try and have a better understanding of what's going on rather than just believing what you've been told.
Right. Well, and that's really the bottom line of it is I hope through what we're doing here is people do learn to be their own fact checkers, right?
Yeah,
Because uh,
absolutely.
and again, I think the debates, generally speaking, are kind of useless anyways because they're so
I agree.
staged. They're just so staged, and we can argue over the should they have turned the microphone off or not microphone, because their role was to kind of keep things moving for
Yeah,
so long and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter because they're really not debates. They're facilitated discussions, or
yeah,
they try to facilitate discussions. And I get it. They're trying to get clarification on positions on things and all that. But I think there is a lot to be said about, hey, you know, a debate should be a debate. It should be between two people, not, and there again, having more than two people and having like three or four from different points of view would even be better.
yeah.
But the just the value of this whole process, I think, at least in this cycle, is really determined. At least for me, is just like this is just a waste of time.
Yeah, but I
It's just
mean,
like,
as I say, just from my perspective, because I always felt like for a long time the best way for a third party to sort of get attention and get people's ideas would be able to get into one of these debates. So I'm
yeah,
kind of a person that would like to see actual debate. I just think that the more you call out the illegitimacy of what we have, the
yeah,
greater chance there is to get something better. And
yeah.
so that's really why I thought that part was important. And I mean, again, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the race
No,
or the election, but we need people saying, look, we've seen what these debates are like. We see that they're corrupt. So let's do something different. And then that argument has credence because everybody can go, you know what? That's right. I did see those debates. They were corrupt. The moderators were biased. Let's let the candidates ask each other questions. And
yeah,
then, you can go from there.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, again, it all goes back to like you said, more speech is better,
Yeah.
but leave it to people to communicate what they believe, not try and filter it through all. Now we don't have to have filters, right? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody's filtering us right now,
Yep.
and which is
Well,
a
no
good
one that we
thing.
know of is filtering
Yeah,
us.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that reminds me. I guess I should look at it after we post it, huh? Yeah, right. No, I know, but it's true, and more is better when it comes to the whole speech thing. And I guess back in the day, maybe when you're thinking back in, pre World War II, when you had, really demonic forces like Hitler and stuff doing stuff, you can see where people would get scared about all this rhetoric and all that kind of stuff. But today, if somebody kind of goes off the rails, that means everybody that disagrees should just, hey, join join the fight. And when I say fight, I mean the argument, not literally fighting,
Yeah.
and drown the person out. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if they're truly that awful, and and don't do it anonymously. I think one of the things that frustrates me, and I'm glad we do what we do, is if you feel some way, you shouldn't be afraid to express your feelings about it. But all these people that go on social media and hide behind their little pseudonyms,
Yeah.
um, is bogus
Yeah.
because you don't know who they are.
Yeah. But I say as time goes on, I hope too that people, when something is very new, you kind of don't know how to interact with it because it's
Yeah,
new. You've never seen
yeah,
it before.
sure.
But as time goes on, I think people will. begin to tune out the anonymous people more and more and
I hope
more. They'll
so.
be like, this is an anonymous person making an anonymous comment somewhere.
Yeah.
They don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I call it the next door effect. If you've ever been on next door, that's where everybody moans and complains about everything about all the local stuff. And it's like, and they all, everybody's got their little names and stuff. It's like, and they'll just go off the rail on some. It's like, who are you? And it's like, why am I even spending time? I don't even go on there anymore. But it's just like, oh my gosh, you got more time to to waste than I do.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right. Well, we better wind this thing up and happy anniversary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll keep her going next week.
Yeah. No, it's great. And as I say, happy anniversary to you. And yeah, here's to another good year.
Sounds good. Talk to you in a bit.
Watch you soon.